Hello everyone. So on Monday night I held an optional synchronous session and it was great because Elizabeth came and I got to catch up a little bit on what's going on up in your area. So congratulations on finishing your first week of school, and I know that you're into the second week right now. And I get it, that first module kind of starts out slow. So I'm going to give you this kind of midweek bump and push to say don't forget to finish your discussions and finish your topics with everyone. But I wanted to cover some of the things that I was going to cover whenever we met in that optional sync session on Monday, just to kind of remind you about some of the things we've been reading and remind you about some of the skills and things you've gained from other courses. So the 4 agreements, of course, is what we always go by, but don't forget about those 6 conditions and things that we used whenever we talked about our race and ethnicity course, where we keep everything local and immediate using that personal I whenever we're having these tough discussions. Isolating race, making sure that people know, number one, in that local and immediate, where you're coming from, where your lens is, what you have, but also not shying away from stating what is out there, what you see, what races are involved in the issue that you're talking about. Normalizing social constructs and multiple perspectives, where you know what the social construct is that you're working within, and also the perspectives that could come along with that, and not just looking through the white lens. Monitor your agreements, of course, whenever you're having tough discussions. Establish parameters of how those discussions are going to go to keep every party safe and brave. Using a working definition for race as you're going through, and I'm pretty sure that all of our counties have that, or all of our school systems have that. And then, of course, examining that presence and role of whiteness in all of the situations. So within our discussion forums for this particular period of time, this module, one of the things I asked you about was institutionalism, and keeping in mind, as you are talking about institutionalism, those 6 agreements are very important. And I appreciated how so many of you that have been in these discussions and have jumped in have really started to talk from that perspective of the personal I. Don't forget to check out those tenets of white supremacy that go into that. And I gave you just a couple of things to think about here as you're watching this. The inequity of how things have been created. So when we're talking about institutionalism in our school systems, remember that this is all Eurocentric. Perfectionism, what we expect from kids. Defensive, then whenever there's an issue that we're defensive about that. How things are urgent for us. There are due dates, but not only that, we feel this urgency of covering curriculum, the urgency of, because this is what our culture has created, that there's one correct way to do it, and that we like things in writing when that may not adjust to other cultures. These are all things that we discussed in our race and ethnicity class, and I feel like as we continue to move through looking at our policies and practices and looking at what we can change, we have to make sure that we're acknowledging how our systems were created, and then the barriers that creates for other cultures or changing cultures within these. So in the module 3, we will be getting back into our Sapphire book, The Listening Leader. That's a book that you used in your ETM 521 class. So one of the things I wanted to just bring up again to discuss is the difference between the 2 types of discourse. And in ETM 521, you got this information from reading that text. It was early on in the text. But just to keep in mind, these are the 2 different types of discourse we do. We need to move into, as leaders, as equitable leaders, into that discourse 2 and make discourse 2 our normal operation mode, where we are always looking at multiple perspectives, where it's always inquiry based, where we're always looking for root causes, overall causes, and not just the symptoms. If we get stuck in discourse 1, it becomes that moment of nothing but complaining. And this is why teachers always say, I avoid the faculty lounge, right? Because it's typically discourse 1 that's happening there. That, there's limited time. Oh my gosh, we don't have time to do things. We can't change things. We're stuck in this thing. This is what the symptoms are. This is what it looks like. where you're just kind of in that rat race. And I hate to say it, but this is so where my school system is right now, where I feel like we go into discourse 2 occasionally. We kind of tiptoe in there. We do a couple of things that look really good, and then all of a sudden we're just back to that reproduction of inequity, and it's kind of frustrating right now. But it's a leadership issue. It is completely a leadership issue. And I'm hopeful that we'll get back to discourse 2 so that we can just get things moving, get things changing, that we don't always have to have the complete answer in the end, because this is our laboratory. And our laboratory is, we look at root causes, we go back, we try to fix things, and then we test it again and we see whether or not we've been successful. And a lot of that in discourse 2, if you consider the projects and assignments that we've done so far in these courses, this is your focus group. Like when you're looking at whether or not you have accomplished anything through discourse 2, you're going back to like using focus group times, talking to your stakeholders. So the critical reflection model that you guys are doing right now as your assignment for module 1, that's in that discourse 2 section. So if we could maintain those kinds of reliabilities, we could actually see if we make it, if we're being successful, and if we're actually being transformational. So in our class, we were going to look at these 2 examples of the achievement gap, and then of course we can't let those students interrupt student learning, and what that looks like whenever people use those terms, and what discourse could look like for those things. So we also hit on leadership archetypes, and again, this is just reminding you things that we had in the Saphir text as they're helpful to us, but how we can be anywhere within this quad, and always to continue to look at where are we and how we're moving within these situations. And then, of course, I love this quote from James Baldwin: "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." We can ignore inequities as long as we want. We can't change them unless we say it's there. And it's going to be tough. It is very, very tough. We're doing some difficult conversations in my school system already. We haven't started school yet with students, but the difficult conversations have surfaced again because people are back in the building. And once we start to have those moments of difficult conversations, we know that we're facing it, and then we've got to transform. Then we have to get into that mode of, what can we do? Let's reach out to our stakeholders. Let's start to move this through and do critical reflection to see how we can make changes. In one of our courses, and I think it may have been 511 again, maybe it was 501, there's a question in the discussion forums about the danger of speaking someone else's story, the danger of assuming someone else's story and sharing that story. The key to doing these critical reflection models and the focus groups and things like that we've done is that, yes, you are learning someone else's story, perhaps so you can represent it, but you are learning someone else's story and not assuming that story or filling in the gaps for that story. So that kind of discussion and asking questions, informal data collection from people as you're just having conversations with parents, other teachers, students, stakeholders within and outside of your building, those are ways that we can really get to know what the story is and what the missing pieces are without assuming it. So that's a very quick review of things that I wanted to kind of cover with you all in our very first module discussion, and encourage you to continue to move forward in your discussion forums. I do appreciate everyone who's jumped in early and got going. If you're having any issues right now, I just need to know. So make sure you email me, send a message, text me if you have to, about any situations that you're having or any reasons why you may be slow in engaging as we got started here. All right, thank you all. It's good to see you again.